Shamanic Voices, a profound journey into the heart of shamanism led by a seasoned practitioner with over 40 years of experience and his journeymen. Join us as we learn how this ancient wisdom can help you navigate your modern life. I'm Brian Nolan, your host, a Journeymen Calli, and with me now is your co-host, Georg Breckman, a shaman, eidetic. Georg, how you doing today?
Very good. Good morning, Brian, and we are honored to have with us today my other journeyman, Calli, who is a priestess of some renown and quite an accomplished healer in her own right, and she'll be sharing her insights into the processes we'll be discussing today.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Great to have you on here again.
I thought the interesting thing we might discuss is some of the sacred lore and the different symbols of the sacred lore which pop up in our sacred lore, the surviving fragments of it, the Kalevala, the Eddas, the Seth, and what this means for us and how we apply it in our own lives, how it helps us to understand as keys, you might say, as code of the other side of the unseen world. And we've all had experiences with this, so I thought it might be useful to our audience to find out from the inside, what is a living pagan tradition, a pagan healing tradition like, where we're actually communing with gods and goddesses, and what do they have to teach us? And Calli's done a wonderful job of maintaining a journal on such events and being able to share right off the bat, probably more than most of us can, which is wonderful.
Vidar's Farce is quite comprehensive. We'll make sure to have the link in the description as well to this.
Well, I am remembering that in some of the healing sequences discussed in the Kalevala, I think maybe when, I'm trying to remember if it's Lemminkainen's bride or Vainamoinen's bride dies, and I think one of them dies, and Ilmarinen is bringing her back to life, made out of gold and silver, rather than, because he couldn't resurrect the old form, so he resurrected her of that the goddess sends off to basically another dimension for sacred bees to bring in the power of resurrection, the life force, the Elan Voima. And it's very interesting when you think of the fact that there is a tribe of people in Nepal and northern India as well who specialize in raiding these really risky beehives way the heck up in tropical tree forests, temperate zone pretty much when you reach that high up in the elevations. It's cold there as well, has 4 seasons. And these bees produce psychedelic honey. The honey harvested from there has very powerful and reportedly very positive effects. I've never tried it myself, but I just wonder if that's part of the origin of this story of bees carrying healing honey,
That's interesting. I've never heard about that. Psychedelic honey.
Seriously, oh no, it's a thing. I think Nat Geo may have even done a piece on it, a bit of interesting anthropology,
Yeah, absolutely.
They're taking quite a risk to get up there. I mean, these people with no beekeeping equipment, none of the usual precautions we would associate with robbing the honeys from the bees, And yet they're doing it. But I think we find many, many other symbols embedded in our lore. Of course, I guess the common ones people think of is, Thor's having the hammer, Heimdall's having, or Heimdall as people call him in English, having the axe and being the axe man standing on the Rainbow Bridge, defending it as a bridge between the worlds, from ruin, from attack. That kind of thing. But I think there are many, many other symbols, the Sampo, many other things referring to the multidimensional aspect of our lives. So anyway, I would welcome any of your recollections of some of your healing journeys so far in your few years of experience as healers and what you've encountered that way.
Well, Calli, why don't you lead off? You've had some pretty fantastic one-on-one encounters with them.
Those are, as I was reflecting, I was thinking back over a few things. But you bringing up the bees was actually something that was on my list because bees show up in folklore so much in the last few years. And this is just a conjecture on my part. I haven't confirmed it in our specific tradition, but we talked about the tradition of when someone in the family would die, there was a tradition that it was called telling the bees. And they would send, I don't remember if it was a child, but someone in the family out to tell the bees. And for whatever reason, that's just what was done. But we know that bees are associated with the Sisters of Fate. And so that makes a lot of sense in my mind that you're connecting with them even through this old folkloric tradition. You don't know that you are still carrying on something so sacred, saying, hey, we're sending you this soul and our loved one is coming. Right, crying. So that's interesting you brought up the bees, because I was...
Well, I think I can kind of connect that for you, Callie, because if you think about it, there's always somebody in your family line, at least in most families, in extended kinship circles, who does perceive that somebody has departed before actually getting news of it. That's the person whom the bee reached. The bee is serving the role as a psychopomp, the same way predators, raptors are often seen, hawks, owls, etc., as psychopomps carrying news between the dimensions. So therefore letting you know that a loved one has departed for other realms.
Interesting. Kind of
and
like...
Interestingly enough, in modern ufology, I couldn't make this stuff up, there is a serious connection between owls showing up just prior to a massive ship coming out. In one instance, a couple of gentlemen camping out in Joshua Tree Forest, I believe, in Southern California, and on top of one of these magnificent cacti, which are like 30 feet tall, is this owl, and it's hooting and it's pointing in a particular direction. They can't make this. So something's coming, and this massive triangular craft shows up a few minutes later.
Wow.
So they seem to be connected with these other dimensional experiences.
It was interesting seeing the correlations between that. I mean, to many might be correlations, to us are just signs.
Just signs, yeah. Well, I think one of the earliest things that you ran into was having a personal encounter with, what's the other name from Mundaforia Bay, showing up as God of Sacred Places on a massive slab, I believe, of stone somewhere in a circle in a clearing in the forest, in the primordial forest. And he appeared gray and kind of covered with ashes and so on. And I just immediately made the connection. Well, this just sounds a lot like Shiva being covered in the ashes of the funeral pyres. As God of funerary rites as well as sacred spaces, it totally made sense. But you saw the image without understanding the sacred connection. So this is how the information gets, I think, verified. No one told you to look for that, or that was the meaning, but there you were seeing this man covered with ashes, So we have these experiences, and when we connect with the recordings of our ancestors, we're simply recording to others much long ago, having written down eventually, or somebody wrote down eventually, what those experiences were.
Yes.
So go ahead.
The same thing happened to me in my first experience ever, after I had met you. So this would be, over 6 years ago now, close to 6.5 years ago. When I had the just total relinquishing of my past beliefs and just saying, I only want truth and what is good and right and of the light. And then I had no idea what was coming to me, or who it was. But when I described him, that there was something anomalous, like he had really thick boots on, and he didn't say any words, and he looked like he was a forest man, very large, and gave me a token, had a fur on his shoulders, and then walked away. And that was my answer to I'm open to the highest truth and the highest good. It doesn't have to fit into my past beliefs anymore, because those weren't working. But I only want, what's right and true moving forward. So, and then when I described that being to you, you said, "Oh, Vidar, God of the primal forest," because of the lore that's been passed down with his boots, and the thickness of one of them, that he defeats Fenris to avenge Odin at Ragnarok. And then also he's known as the Silent One. And in interactions with him, and especially that first one, no words, to very few words, always knowing that this is a holy presence, and his communication was far beyond words. And I couldn't have possibly known that. I don't even know if I had started reading the Rydberg at that point.
No, you hadn't started reading Rydberg yet. So this was, again, where we get confirmation from the other side according to what people have previously recorded, which is wonderful when that happens. Really wonderful,
Well, I had a client who, and this is not a huge experience or anything. I mean, it was magical in the sense of what happened, but I had a client that walked into the place that I work doing medical massage part-time, and I did not expect to be doing a shamanic regression with them suddenly. They just came in for, my back hurts. And I realized, okay, something's going on. Something's got to start. And you met this client. And they start describing Velomode to me. She's like, I don't know what's happening, but I'm seeing something right now. Starts describing the long brown hair. Waters are around coming out of this lake. I go, you have no idea who this is. You don't even know what I do. And you're describing this person to me. And no, it was who I saw was helping with what was going on. I just kind of eased in it going, there's something going on in the cellular memory. Are you okay with a little bit of energetic work going on? I want to help release what's going on here. Just kind of ease into it. And that's what she saw. So that was my confirmation of, yep, that's definitely happening. There's no way that's fake.
Yep.
So it's always very cool. And I mean, that started that person on a really path of starting to, they were already on a good path, but starting to really just help push forward that next little notch. So it's very strange how the gods and goddesses work like that. I mean, I expected to be going here and just every now and then seeing normal clients, and at this point, just people keep randomly booking, coming in, and they end up being there for a reason. Not that everything happens for a reason, but they end up having an issue, and they're like, I don't know why, it just felt like having massage today. I said,
well, I don't think every single thing happens for a reason, but I think that certainly the fates are sending people your way who actually need what we do.
Absolutely.
I think I could certainly establish such a pattern.
yeah, without a doubt. I had it's pretty amusing, to put it simply. But,
well, also some of the symbols are probably, we tend to get into the trap, I think, as modern people with an ancient tradition. And the ancient tradition can become like baggage if you misunderstand it, if you make the mistake of thinking of it as a dry, desiccated sort of mummy in some desert cave somewhere, which I think is how some of the other faiths look at their lore. And, there was an age of miracles and it was back there in the past somewhere. It doesn't happen now. And I found just the opposite to be the truth, that it does happen now. They are in touch with us now. This is a living tradition. They are living beings. And they jolly well do communicate with us and with those with whom we work as healers and as counselors,
Well, speaking of signs, let me get both your opinions on this one, because I don't think I've ever even brought this up. But prior to training with you, Greg, and learning about this stuff, myself and my wife would have these experiences where at certain really important times, out of nowhere, we just see like a red-tailed hawk just flying over us. But the one that was the most impactful was when we had chosen to move from this one house to another. And I hadn't really started any sort of spiritual path or anything like that, but I was actively trying to get healthy, be in recovery, practice mindfulness, and I had some experiences that kind of pushed me towards this. But a red-tailed hawk landed right in front of us, about 5 foot, and just sat there and stared at us. And we both looked at each other going, that is not normal. That is not normal. That is a sign that we should be doing what we're doing right now. I said, I don't know how to explain that to you. And she goes, I agree. I don't know what that means either. And then from then on, every time there's an important thing, we'd see a hawk suddenly. It'd appear out our window, and I go, all right, that's got to mean something. That's got to mean something.
I used to have hawks fly over my back deck all the time. I think they would go down to the creek quite often. And also pileated woodpeckers would appear somewhere from down there. Pretty crazy because they fly like a sine wave, kind of like that. And they have this call that sounds like a crazy person laughing. They're really spectacular. They're some sort of a flying dinosaur is what they look like, So I always took their occasions when they would fly really close as meaning something, and usually presaged something. So we see that. But I think one of the traps we tend to get into is thinking that our experiences are limited only to what happened in the past. And we've all had experiences where the gods or goddesses have shown us something that's not covered in what they call mythology. In other words, the sacred lore of anybody but Jews, Christians, and Muslims. All the rest of it being called mythology. No, our sacred lore, our cosmology, our theology, I think continues to grow, and it's supposed to grow through people like us recording what we know and sharing our experiences with those who will come after us. I think that's a very important function that we shall all serve as bridges between the past and the future.
Well, it's like I was just explaining this to a client that I had about working on a heart issue for him, and talking about how our tradition has evolved over the years, training as Titiya, training as Teutonic healers, because just as ailments and society has evolved, so has it alongside. You didn't used to have, coronary artery disease like they do now from, oils and everything else. Well, you had other things like motility issues, but people eat a very healthy diet. It was very, very different what they dealt with. So if it was not alive and growing, how would we be able to interact with people on that level?
Yeah, I see your point.
So it's kind of the proof of the evolution of it. If we're still doing what we do, it's not in the past.
Yeah, you're right. And many examples where they're showing us aspects of themselves that we had not seen before. I had been studying about Ilmarinen. Of course, he is, god of the winds, one of the creator gods of the Kalevala, of the Finnish tradition. But more than that, I came to see very early in my interactions with him that he was also god of technology. If I really was stumped with something and reaching in for how to make one of the healing devices that I used to make, I would just propose a problem, just a blind alley I went into. And sometimes in a dream or whatever, I would just see a solution right after speaking, appealing to Ilmarinen for inspiration in that. So then I realized he's the god of technology. And yet he's not recorded that way in the sagas. Now you could say that, or in the Eddas or in the Kalevala, you could say there's something like that in the Norse tradition, with the smithy being kind of the equivalent to a dark elf, a smithy being one of the dark elves who specializes in making technology, and especially Valand Smith, who forges Thor's hammer and so on, does these sacred objects for the gods and goddesses.
Well, I remember the first time you told me, no, you didn't tell me to do this. You were just describing to me a trip down the interstate where you were having a good old conversation with Ilmarinen. And this is very early on in the training. And I forget what it was about. It was some client you were working with, trying to figure out what to do with that. And I just remember seeing this image of Ilmarinen and you just chatting away like old friends, like sitting in a coffee shop. I go, interesting. Because hadn't we discussed it? I had just started reading Riedberg, And then about 2 or 3 days later, I'm driving and I'm remembering this conversation that I had with you, and I'm thinking about a client, and he pops in, and I start having a conversation with him. I don't remember for the life of me what it was. It was very straightforward, just very quick. This is what you need to do. I'm like, who is this? Marinen? Okay, I'm gonna double check this with my teacher just to make sure what this is. But it just popped in like that, and it was a conversation. And
I do remember the incident you were describing, but go ahead. Yeah.
it was just, to me, I was caught off guard, not in a bad way, but I could not rationalize that, how you said I'm having a conversation with, until I actually had it happen. I think it's one important thing for a lot of people. When I explain to them what we do, they try to wrap their head around going, how do I understand it? You don't. You understand through experience. You can only explain what you've experienced yourself. That's it. You can explain the healing that was imparted. You can explain what you experienced during.
Well, depending on the tradition they're from, I mean, their own Bible is full of conversations with angels or, prophets or whatever. I think that's the same way with Islam. Their encounters with other order of beings.
Yeah.
It just doesn't often include a visual component. In this case, I had just left after doing a very grueling 2-week stint doing a clinic in Indianapolis and a clinic in Ohio, or vice versa, which it was. Maybe I'd gone to Cincinnati first, then to Indianapolis. So leaving in Indianapolis, and I got this call from a friend of ours, actually, you might recall, who's a PharmD, and she has a pretty good practice up there. Ran experiments for big labs, it had universities and all that, great technical understanding and all that, and quite an intuitive mind as well. And her brother was in ICU, dying of COVID, it seems he had the vaccination, but it didn't help him. And he's like 68, I think, something like that. And I'm thinking what to do with this while I'm traveling. So, well, okay, I'll do what I can. And let me see if I can summon some help to remove this from him. Because, so what are the presenting complaints? Well, he's on a respirator. And I thought, well, this is not good being on a respirator. I hope they haven't given him remdesivir, because that's kind of the kiss of death right there. It shuts down your kidneys within 9 days. And apparently they had not done that, fortunately. But it didn't look good, and so I just asked of the Thingstead, who of the gods and goddesses can help me with this? This man's in trouble. He's very close brother to a friend of mine, a coworker. What can we do? And Neil Marina just piped right up and said, well, I can fashion something that will remove the virus. I said, well, wonderful. Would you do that? Yes. Okay. So, and actually I was on the way, Callie, to your house for a seasonal festival that you had there, and coming straight down and hoping to make it in some sort of time all the way from Indianapolis to the wilds of the Tennessee-Alabama border there where you are. And so coming along, he showed me, he said, well, just hold out your hand. So I'm driving on and I hold out the other hand. I just felt something being put in. So what is this? He said, well, these are nanobots. You'll apply them to Bob's lungs and his trachea and his otolaryngral area, and it's going to resolve the problem. I said, wonderful. How so? He said, well, think of these as shiny little things that look a lot like one of your vehicles that are going to scavenge all of the COVID and remove it from his system, and then they will exit his system harmlessly and harmoniously. I thought, he's using one of my words, harmlessly and harmoniously, because that's the way we learn to bless things. And he kind of chuckled when I said that. And I said, well, thank you. I much appreciate it. So then I had to stop for gas about, 2 hours away from your place. Stopped and called her back and said, okay, has there been any changes? She said, oh, yes, he's breathing without help now. And blah, blah, blah. I said, well, good. Well, then the next day, our other person in training here, one of our apprentices, Lori, was at the church where she works part-time doing something as I think she's a treasurer, where we have our do our healing clinics a couple of times a year. And just as she's pulling in there, she looks outside toward the south, and hovering over the road is this progression of silver craft. You would call them UFOs, but they look exactly like these silver nanobots. And I took that as a wonderful confirmation. There was no other reason to be there, no reporting of a UFO flap in the area or anything like that. And she said, "What does that mean?" I said, "I know. That just connected something for me. That's just confirmation of their interference, of their intervention in a life or death situation, literally."
Yeah.
So that's the kind of thing where we see it. And there's nothing in the sacred lore that says anything about nanobots. These weren't understood as an autonomous, miniature, almost alive machine.
I don't think they would understand it back then. Frankly, it'd be a different kind of concept.
Yeah. I mean, robotics hasn't been invented above all the idea of miniature or microscopic level robotics, but here's one of the gods using it freely.
Yeah. What I found one of the most fascinating parts is in starting to get to know the gods more and more is actually experiencing the different personalities and
Yeah.
speaking to Ati and seeing how it is very much stone-faced. This is what you get. or hearing some of the jokes, the really strange, dark sense of humor that they have. And just when you kind of feel that personality and you get to know them more as a friend, not just as an overlord, omnipotent being controlling you like a marionette. They
never come across that way at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then getting to know the EDs is a whole different story.
well, Callie, do share some of your experiences that way. I see that rang a bell, what Brian was talking about.
Oh, I mean, I've, as far as getting to know their personalities, there have been so many times that they have made me laugh, and it's usually one of the most profound learning experiences. Last winter we were dealing with a lot of spiritual stuff, and I was trying to get my feet back under me and recover. And in the winter, I usually work more with Ulur, god of winter, Father Winter. And so I was just, exhausted and emotional. And so he took me to his, one-room cabin in the Forest of the Gods, meeting with him in winter. And I was sitting at the table talking with him, and he has this rugged wilderness man feeling, as well as he's where the Father Winter stories come from, this gleam in his eye and the cherishing of the future generations, and this youthfulness, even though he appears like a Santa Claus type figure, only far more realistic. But he took me, he had me get up, he took me outside, and he literally just took his hand and pushed me in to this hot spring pool. And because I was worried, is there more spiritual stuff stuck that's going to block me from accurately being able to help people or protect my family? And he's like, "No, look, here's my water, here's my pool. How do you like that? Just get up and do the job. Trust it. I dunked you in my water. Girl, get up." And I was like, okay, I'm getting up. I'll just get back to work. But, then he took me inside and wrapped me up, and my clothes were hung to dry, and I had this big wool thing wrapped around me, and I think he poured me a cup of something hot, and we continued our conversation. But it was just straighten up your mindset. And it was really, really funny. I remember coming up out of the water like it was totally unexpected, out of love, but kind of tough love. So
you tell me that your experience with the gods isn't just them telling you, you are so important, you are magical, you are the savior of the world.
Absolutely not.
I'm pretty sure that's what I see normally whenever someone has an experience with a god or a goddess.
It's how special they are, right?
Yeah.
It's how special they are, yeah.
Right.
No, I would say ours tend to leave us with a great sense of humility and how special we're not, and how much we need to roll up our sleeves and get to work and make and do something that matters. I remember when I was in training, meeting one of the old Swedes who had, I want to say there were around maybe 1,200 Swedes who volunteered with the Finnish forces. There were other volunteers came from elsewhere, just like people are going today to volunteer with Ukraine. Same way. And he was telling me about being really lost. He was on skis. He's got his winter white uniform on, all that, his Mauser, and he's trying to find his way back. He's a scout, so he's out there scouting Russian positions. He just completely lost. Compass is broken. It's in the middle of winter, and he's suddenly in the distance, just the spray of snow coming off a set of skis ahead of him follows it, gets closer. And it was Skadi, the goddess of winter, skiing ahead of him. And she guided him back to our lines. Which otherwise, if you're not back where you need to be and you don't have access to food and warmth and so on, you freeze to death, so it's no joking matter to get stuck out there without a way home. That's a bad place to be.
Yeah.
Mm.
So he said at that point, I knew that this was not folklore.
Well, I remember my first time, and this wasn't an encounter with a god or a goddess, but it was so impactful that it's what started me training under you and seeing this was real. I mean, when I first met you and came down there to buy energy rocks because my ego was so far at my own keister that I could heal anything by pushing energy into people. You'd said that you hoped there was a case maybe while I was down there, and you had a client, a friend of ours, call in because their child had smashed their knee into the concrete. It was swollen 2 times the size it should be. I believe he was 4 or 5 years old at the time. And I'm sitting there with my wife on the couch as you are on Skype with these people. And I'm seeing this kid screaming, crying. And I'm like, what is going to happen? What are you going to do here? And I hear you call out to Mailiki, the goddess of the forest, goddess of healing, and ask her to take away the child's pain while you worked, to place this into her oaken basket, and to bring this to Pain Hill to be turned into joy. And I just feel this massive pressure enter the room, and I see the kid stop crying. The little one just stopped crying, and I sat there going, that's not an actor. There's no way that's fake. That kid is literally in pain, screaming. And my wife was sitting there, and she said to me, she goes, if I didn't see this with my own eyes, I would not believe this at all. And every time we recall that, it just brings tears to my eyes because it was real. It showed that the folklore was real.
Well, it wasn't just the pain, and this is one of the joys of seeing them work. And I must say they're working rather than myself, seeing the leg, the swelling just immediately go away.
Yes, as you started working on it, describing the whole process, then I watched it deflate, and that just confirmed it more. At this point, I have thought I lost my mind slightly, of course, but it showed reality, and I sat there analyzing it over and over and over, trying to find
minds can be overrating. Minds can be overrated. It's not a bad idea to lose it, as long as someone benevolent catches it on the other end of things.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like that happened a few times. But when I try to analyze that over and over, looking for the angles of what's the play here? There's no play. Okay, what does he gain? I already bought the energy rocks. What is he gaining from showing me this? And then the angle came. It was, would you like to train with me? And my first question was, well, how much does it cost? And he kind of chuckled and he said, that's not how this works. And I was like, okay, this does not make any sense in my mind at all what's going on. I'm going to go home and take a break for a couple days. But I couldn't find anything wrong. It was such a genuine experience. And I don't think I'd ever experienced something like that before my entire life, where there's genuine, no manipulation, just straight, this is to heal someone.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are humbling experiences when we encounter them, and the origin is beyond myself. I think sometimes they stage it for one of you to see, to know, to feel, to experience, so you then can share the magic with others. You know?
Yeah.
And Callie, you've had some amazingly magical encounters. Do share some of them.
Well, recently we had talked to, I'm totally blinking on her name now, at Ku, Finnish goddess of the moon, on behalf of a client for a very interesting, intricate, complicated, long-term case. And I had already experienced the different deities of the moon, Nagve, Mundofori, and I had also experienced the spirit of the moon, or the deity behind it, coming to me as a swan. And when Greg told me the name of the goddess that we were to contact on behalf of this individual, and I did the meditation and connected with her, and also Lohi, goddess of shamanism. She had her robe was fluffy, and I was like, are those swan feathers? And I talked to, this was not prefaced by Greg. He just told me her name, and that's how she came through. And I said, okay, does she come as a swan or dressed in a swan cloak, like other goddesses have different, bird cloaks that they wear? And he said, yes. And so it's another instance of experiencing the divine in their natural identity, without having been told, what they were associated with, or how they appeared, or the nature of their person, prior to really meeting them and getting to know them a little better. So I'm really grateful for that experience, and hope to work with her some more. So that would be wonderful.
Yeah, I think what happens quite often, we are given this very limited explanation of who the gods and goddesses are and what their nature of their interaction with us, with humanity, is in some of the surviving, more commonly known sources. But then what we encounter is so far beyond that. And my own experiences with this was on one occasion, having this terminal cancer patient visit the camp where I was training. And just basically he's been told by the doctors back in Stockholm to just, get hold of hospice. You've got a few months left, get your affairs in order. There's nothing that we can do. And he was a researcher at one of the big research institutes, kind of the equivalent to Mayo Clinic here. So he was not somebody unaware of biomedical technology and cutting-edge medicine and all that stuff, and still didn't see any way to do it. And when he came to visit, the teachers started speaking to Tapio, the god of the forests, and calling up, and it was winter, and there were pretty huge snowdrifts, but large windows you could look out, double paned, of course, at the temperatures up there, and see this totally silent, windless, drifting snow, as they started calling to the different trees to come through and cleanse the cancer out of his system. One part of the forest to the other started moving. You actually started seeing trees moving. They asked for the limbs, for the needles of the fir, the needles of the spruce, and of the pine, and then they would call on the limbs of the rowan, limbs of the birch, the saps of the trees to go through and cleanse it from his system. And sure enough, different parts of it came alive, and you saw this, and we were all just looking out there in awe. And this individual came back to see us a year later, hale and hearty and healthy, no trace of the cancer, whatever, He'd gone back to work, was a happy camper, and just came back to say thank you and made a donation to help keep the place going and all that. It was just really delightful to see this happen. Now, again, there's nothing in the Kalevala, nothing in the Eddas that speaks of their using the saps of the trees and the essences of trees to clean out a serious illness from our bodies, and yet there it was. So there, just as then some aspect of what they do would come through, other aspects will come through us as the living chroniclers of our ongoing engagement, our ongoing encounter with this other level of reality that is the gods and goddesses, this other level of benevolence and intelligence that are the sacred ones.
Yes.
Yeah.
I remember we've talked about even like in certain phrases of colloquialisms, there's something in our mass subconscious that connects to certain things, like feeling frayed, or he's in the pink, or she's feeling blue today. And these were all ancient memories or imprints for how healers would have worked, and in our tradition still do work with the different layers of one's being in order to bring healing, or work with the gods and goddesses to help the Sisters of Fate are weaving the threads of reality, the web of weird together. So it's no wonder we could I'm feeling frayed or frazzled.
Right.
So it's a direct correlation to another world that we still recognize without consciously being aware of it.
Yes, and the pink and the blue are probably referring to aspects of our auras, because we know that magenta is a happy aura color,
Right. Mm-hmm.
And a dark blue can be, it's not necessarily bad, but it's certainly somber, So we learn a lot of these things, and it's recorded in the collective unconscious that Jung spoke of and wrote about, But we also, I know, Callie, you discovered, and I've seen her use it since then, that Lohi also uses a ladle to pour out sacred waters or medicines over people when they are ill, and has also used the label, I think, as a cudgel at times, So it's,
yeah, experienced that. What did you say, cudgel?
Yes, used as a cudgel, her long wooden ladle of some sort.
Dishing out some of their own medicine to those who needed a little, nudge.
Sure.
That was very interesting. That was in the last couple of weeks.
So I think it all gets down to, in the Semitic mythology traditions, any of the three of them, you have the idea of this single God as a dictator of reality. In our tradition, on the other hand, you have the idea that the world is far from a settled kingdom. It's like this battleground between different forces of good and ill, of resolution and coherence versus disintegration and incoherence. And this goes on at all levels, in all ways, both physically, morally, etc. So we learn through this that we're dealing not with a single dictator. Yes, there could be a father of the gods, a leader of the gods and goddesses. Yes, of course, just like a Congress has a Speaker of the House or President of the Senate, that sort of thing. But we're dealing with a committee of dedicated, benevolent beings with whom we can converse, with whom we can reach out and commune. And that makes life a lot more worth living, knowing that they're there, that other side awaits us,
Yeah.
Indeed. I had an experience this morning, actually, to talk about being afraid. I will just give you the end story of it for the purposes of communicating what needs to be communicated at this time. But it was still very early and I needed more rest. And I felt afraid. And Velamo came and I was immediately beside a different pool than she had taken me to before. She showed me this is the tidying pool. So I think what I'm learning is she has some different purposes for some of her different pools and waters. But it was like down my back, like my spine was a braid of hair. And she showed me where that hair was, had been frayed, split. And the braid was still largely there, long all the way down my spine. But it wasn't healthy hair and connected at that point. And so she started using her waters and she pulled out the strands that had broken and then regrew them perfectly while it was all still in the braid, and she made the braid look right. And then she had like a looking glass there by the pool. And she just said one word, and she just said beautiful. Like, I need to remember that they have me. And I think it was more of a sense of not beautiful, but whole. Like a goodness to who I am and what I've dedicated my life to. And there was this imagery coming through because I think she could feel the exhaustion. Basically I was brought to mind for me the image of someone else who we all know who is very self-absorbed, so much so that this individual can hardly make any decisions decisively for themselves, let alone do anything effective in the world. And It was kind of like, well, no, that's not who I am. So I will gladly set aside what I have to set aside, for me, and just trust the gods and goddesses, because that's not who I am. And I choose to do everything that I can to work hard. So if I'm occasionally exhausted and this is how they're going to take care of me, then I'm good with that. Yeah. So that was this morning's experience. I'm still processing, but that just seemed to link up to what you were just saying, Greg. So thought I would share that.
Well, Bryan, why don't you lead us on toward where we need to go with some of your experiences where you've encountered help from the other side?
Well, what's interesting is what came to mind as you were just saying that, Callie, was sometimes when it really matters, especially when you're overstressed and you've been working really hard, and when you learn real quickly when you do this work that you devote yourself to the work. You're going to be exhausted. You're going to put it in. It's worth it, though. But those experiences, whether it's a simple, quick, hey, we're here, we're helping you out, or meeting them or hearing them, they come through when it's needed. Normally it's with some fun laughter and some weird experiences, but it really does line up with when you're really feeling not at wit's end, but when you need it. But I recently just had something like that come in because, we deal with interference from this. As you mentioned, there's a constant battle between good forces and bad forces, conflict and not resolving issues. And through all the things that have gone on from beginning training, I got confirmation when I had a fantastic conversation with Freya, getting to know more and more just how sassy she is. It is pretty funny. And she makes fun of me constantly whenever I'm being impulsive and reminds me. But I had a friend over and we had an experience with her and AT and the EDs. And during this entire process, she is making me laugh. She's calling me out in between interference and back and forth and teaching me. As she said in the beginning, she was going to help train me, which, it's one of those things where you don't really understand what that means until you understand it. But she gave me confirmation through an experience over the last couple of days and really just finished today, which is interesting that you just had this experience with Velamo today, of showing me this entire process that they were watching. Not that everything happens for a reason, opportunities and whatnot, but they were watching because they wanted to push forward. They wanted it, the whole point of our experience is to evolve as humans and as healers and as Tietia. And that she was there the whole time. And that she was not always interfering, but seeing that this would be the best outcome. And I mean, both of you know what I'm referring to and what all that ties into. But for me, that was a confirmation of I'm exactly where I need to be, committing the right level of work that I need to do. And it made such a world of difference.
Yeah. Well, even if we look at the lore itself, there are hints, there are symbols of what all of this is all about. Ukko's sending down his iron rods to attack sources of illness, for example, and sometimes you can actually see like a pool of illness and imagine something hitting it, and you think of the kinetic weapons, which would be a titanium or a steel rod hurtling through space at enormous speed and exploding, not due to any explosive substance, but due to the kinetic energy of the round hitting it at super high speed and just deatomizing at a very high rate of speed. That kind of thing happening. So you see these symbols encoded in the folklore, in the sacred lore, which comes down to us. And it is meaningful stuff. You think of Heimdallr's white fire. Well, what we see in the literature is, okay, he's the god of the hearth fire, the useful fire that keeps us warm and cooks our food. But beyond that, when I got into training, after reading those sources and being aware of it that way on an intellectual level, I saw many cases where the teachers would invoke his fire and actually direct it with their mind to clear out a tumor or clear out a scar tissue inside a person's body or whatever they needed. And it worked, just like some sort of psychic, or I should say spiritual, more like it, not due to one mind, but spiritual laser beam that could remove aberrant tissue.
Yeah.
And so there it is, not listed anywhere, but this is something that came to us much, much later through this group of people who are practicing the old ways and finding the new ways in it. Now, there are traditionalists. There are traditionalists. We've read some of their works, and you see some of them online. Who, boy, if it's not in the Eddas, it doesn't exist. It can't be real. And I say to them, if I speak to a god or goddess, invoking the old ways and their old names and how we understand them to be, and they respond with something which saves a life and improves a life, why should I argue with that?
It's almost the opposite of the whole point. How they're looking at it. They're looking, don't grow, hold on to the old. That's not what we push for.
Yeah, we don't want them to be museum pieces,
I'm also being reminded of something right now by Imarinen, and which is interesting, always coming through those points, that to get to know the gods, or to do this type of, it's not to do this type of work, but to be able to experience anything like this. It's not just you call out to a god and go, who are you? And accept that, as you see in a lot of new age healing where people will just assume because something responded, that's what it is. You have to learn who they are. You have to get to know them. You read the sacred lore, have conversations. It's not, I don't even mean just to heal people, just to connect with them. You can't just pick up the phone and dial a random number and it's your great-great-grandfather. Even if you do get the right number, he wants to know, why are you calling me? You never talked to me before. What do you want, my money? You have to get to know them.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, reaching them for guidance, for inspiration. I mean, there are many, many reasons to reach out to them.
Yeah, exactly.
And also hoping that we hold on to our genetic base here, our territories here, such as they are, shrinking as though they are, and our folkways here, so that we continue to host them and to keep them in our minds, and for more of us to become aware of them,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think this was a fantastic sharing today of different sacred experiences, folklore. Calli, Greg, is there anything else that you guys would like to add?
I think we could, sit and talk for hours and hours and hours.
Well, I'm sure we're going to do more episodes. I meant to kind of sum up everything from
particular, today. But yeah, some wonderful stories to communicate the reality that they still are very present, and it's a real path of faith. It's not something that is just codified and you're told to believe because it's written in some book. It's aligns with real life, down through all the levels of, the three-dimensional reality up into the spiritual realms.
Yeah.
Well, the next podcast, I would like to start delving into our Teutonic equivalent to what today is known as psychotherapy. And we could start discussing that. It might be an interesting topic.
I think that would be a fantastic topic.
A bit about dealing with physical illness, but I'd like to speak about dealing with mental and emotional disturbances as well in our traditional way of understanding them.
I look very much so forward to it.
Quite a bit different. Well, thank you both. Been a wonderful exchange.
Thank you, sir.
It has indeed. And I look forward to Calli having you on here again to share more experiences in the future and anything else that comes up. So everyone, thank you.
And let's be sure that we're going to put up Calli's on our show notes, the Greenlass, your website, and a bit of information about anything you want to go up there, Calli. You just tell me what it is.
Okay.
Of course,
sure.
we've already got the Sade listed up there for people to be able to order it.
Yep.
Tune into some ancient wisdom for themselves.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Well, been an enjoyable discussion. Go with the gods.
Go with the gods. Thank you for joining us on Shamanic Voices. If you like what you heard, please subscribe, share, follow us on social media. Every click helps us with this project as we try to share with the world customs passed down in the ancient Scandinavian tradition for over 8,000 years. We hope you enjoyed our podcast today, examining how we relate to the Shining Ones and the light that they shed into our lives and healing experiences. Thank you to Calli for joining us today and sharing with us your profound experiences. You can find her website in the episode description at the Green Lass. Don't forget to check out our website, teutonichealing.com, where you can explore more about what it is that we do, contact us for a session, or send us your questions to have answered. Next episode, join us as we discuss modern-day psychotherapy and dive into it a little more of the psychological side of things. See you next time on Shamanic Voices. Go with the gods.